All right. So first, Yoden, can you please confirm for the record that we have quorum, which is 8 people?
Yes,
Perfect.
well, one's present virtually.
Yes. Okay, yes, which counts, okay. All right, good evening, everyone. This is the State Licenses and Permits Committee of Community Board 5. I'm Seth Borden, your committee chair, and we'll go around the room to introduce ourselves. Starting with Yoden, who I'd like to congratulate on being appointed vice chair.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm gonna quickly introduce yourselves. Yeah, Alan.
I'm Andrea A, new to the community board. Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zona, like Arizona. I live on 55th and 6th.
I like that.
Blowing my mind. Hi, I'm Milan Mijatovic.
Hi, I'm Libby Hutton.
Yoran Nodi Victor.
And then online, we'll go to Catherine first.
I'm Catherine Ellington.
Perfect. All right, so we have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First, we're gonna do 65 West 36th Street, doing business as Chamber. And then second, we'll do 21 West 35th Street, doing business as Bar Chef New York. And then the third item will be the RLA Task Force, and that will be an item we don't need to have a resolution for, but we're gonna have a discussion on that one. So before we start moving through the agenda, is there anyone attending that has any other business for the committee other than those items? If so, please raise your hand here in the room or use the raise hand button if you're attending virtually. All right, seeing none, new business is closed and we'll move on to the first agenda item, which is Chamber. So this application, Milan took the lead, and before we have Milan give a summary of the issues, I want to have the applicants who are here in the room with us give a short introduction. And then we'll go on to questions after that. So with that, I will pass it over to the applicants who are here tonight to, just give a quick summary of your operation.
So first of all, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. My name is Ben Korngut. I'm the attorney for the applicant. The corporate name is Chamber 2FL LLC. I have with me tonight Jarrett Ham, who is the operations manager. His father is the legal owner, but Jarrett is really behind the scenes. And Alan Firestein, who is an acoustic engineer and conducted an acoustic a sound test, which we've provided you the report for. Just to give you a little background, this is an application for an on-premises liquor license at 65 West 36th Street on the 2nd floor. Jarrett's family owns 4 other karaoke bars in the city. This will be a karaoke bar as well. They've operated for many years with no violations. They've proven themselves to be good operators. This is really a family-run business. Jarrett has been working in the business for approximately 23 years, learning the ropes from his father. They also own Den Social, which is downstairs, which has been open since 2019. And I'm not aware of any violations at that location. This is going to be a separate concept than the first floor, which is why we're applying for a different license. It is going to be karaoke. It's going to cater to, we call it a more mature crowd. Focus on wine on the menu, so more of a sit down. The common area is going to be more the lounge level, and obviously there's going to be karaoke rooms, so those are going to be typical volume for karaoke. We submitted the initial notice to you in November of 2024. We hope you understand we've been attempting to work with you in good faith since then. Jarrett has engaged an acoustical engineer to do the requested survey. He has reached out to residents in the Hollingsworth, and he's gotten 8 signatures of support, which we've submitted to you. In terms of the location itself, it's on the 2nd floor. The 1st floor of the building has parking garages directly adjacent. The 2nd floor, there's a roof to the east. Is that east side? So it's a roof where they play outdoor movies occasionally. To the west, we understand the Hollingsworth is building apartments right there. So, a few of them may be occupied. Management did give us access to one of the vacant apartments that is directly adjacent, and Alan can talk about the sound tests that were conducted in that apartment. The entrance to the Hollingsworth is on 37th Street, so there's no residential building entrances on 36th Street, and the rest of the block is purely commercial. Jared, do you want to add anything just about the concept?
Yeah, I mean, the concept for our second floor establishment is, like Ben touched on, it's more of a, a older crowd. And the music will be more of a lounge volume where people could conversate, and drink wine. So that was our concept. And the second floor will also be a reservation place where there's no people, like there's no general admission. It's just like a restaurant. You'll have to book a table to get in. And yeah, and as Ben touched, the foundation for our business is the private karaoke rooms, which we're soundproofing as well. And yeah, that's pretty much, I mean, and I explained to Milan when he visited, I think, our concept already when we first met. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thanks. And Alan, I don't, you want to just quickly go through, do you want him to go through the sound report now or wait until?
Actually, Milan, do you have a preference on that or?
I could certainly summarize some of the other things that have already been addressed and outstanding, and I think the sound would be part of that, so it might make sense for me to cover some of my items.
Yeah, let's have you go first and then we can flip
Okay,
back if
yeah.
that sounds good.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too laborious.
Perfect.
Yeah, so obviously you all have summarized, kind of given us an overview on the application, so just a summary of things that have been addressed that we've gone back and forth on. Also, please feel free to keep me honest if I've made a mistake on anything. And I'll also prioritize things that I know are important to the SLAP committee. Promoters, I believe we reconciled that. Applicant confirmed in writing there will be no outside promoters or promotional events. Crowd control, applicant agreed to CB5 standards for respectful entry exit, no loitering, smoking outside, keeping the area clean. Sanitation, applicant will comply with sanitation regulations. Sound study, which we will get into, we did receive that report. So I'll leave that to you to dive into that in more depth. Petitions and support were provided, like you noted. Also, we did note that there were neighbor notifications made that signs were posted at the Hollingsworth as requested. So I think two items that we would like to review and clarify. And this is it's possible this may have just got lost in the email shuffle. So again, please keep me honest. I think there were some, there might have been an outstanding item regarding a certificate of occupancy. So that is one item. I know it was discussed either in progress or that you were going to provide that. And then probably the bigger issue and likely the crux of our conversation is going to be around operating hours. We have CB5 guidelines. I know that our applicant is interested in going a little outside of those guidelines, and I think that's probably going to be the main focus of our conversation. That's all I've got. As far
Okay.
as outstanding items.
Just quickly on the certificate of occupancy, permits have been filed to change the use of the second floor, that it's not finalized yet. He's in the middle of construction, but we're happy to provide it as soon as we get it. And then, Alan, I don't know, do you want to dive into the specific tests you recorded?
Sure. All right, so I did a test of sound transmitting from the new karaoke studios on the second floor to a directly adjacent building, the Hollingsworth, in an apartment that was vacant. Even with that test where I was using a loudspeaker that I brought in, it had loud music, it was 103 decibels, which is louder than they want to play. So I'm recommending that they keep it at the level that they promised to keep it at, which is 95 decibels. But actually, the way we're doing that is to keep the level at 100 decibels, but the frequency that's the biggest problem is a specific frequency called 63. That will be rolled off. That way they can get louder sound if they want it without as much bass, which is the sound, as you all know, that usually travels through walls, in this case, brick walls, as well as built out sheetrock, which they did. So I've made recommendations for the filter settings on their sound systems, as well as in the common area in the front. And that's really what they need is a limiter, which is two benefits. Number one, protects the neighbors. Number two, it protects the sound system from being blown up.
Perfect.
And fortunately, the apartment next door was vacant, so management was nice enough to give Alan access to it, where he was able to run tests in the actual apartment that's directly adjacent.
Yeah, I should say that they were happy to accommodate us, and when I did the test with the louder sound than they planned to use, the sound was below the legal limit in the apartment. So with the level even lower, it'll be even lower. In fact, it's lower than the ambient noise in the apartment.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for the summary. That's really helpful and great to hear about the sound study and getting to do it in the apartment. It's pretty rare, so good to hear. So I guess anyone else from the committee have any quick comments before we move on to the discussion here and the questions?
Okay.
My questions.
Oh, not quite. Yeah, questions next. Yeah, any other comments? So yes, we'll move on to questions. Everybody, if you have questions, raise your hand in person or on Zoom as well. You're on.
This is more for Josh, we heard about the signatures from the folks in favor, which is great. Did we get any resident response negative, that was negative about? Great, okay.
Thank you guys for all coming.
Yeah,
in
thank
person.
you.
I think
Thank
it's
you.
really awesome. I think I've like definitely been to a bunch of your venues. Glad to see everyone opening. Could you comment a little bit just on like the timeline to implementing the recommendations that were outlined in the sound study? It sounds like the limiter itself won't be a hard lift, but if there's any changes to the structure itself, like what the timeline to implementing would be?
No, I usually make recommendations for soundproofing, and as the final measure, all my reports have sound system.
Okay,
In this case, it's just sound system.
got it,
The soundproofing has already been done.
got it. So
Not-
it's like very easy to
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like hours requested, could you kind of like walk us through how you thought about the hours, especially like. It looks like this is co-located with Den Social, which online has like a 2-3 AM close, like how are you thinking about hours between the two spaces?
Well, I think Den it's,
Well, yeah, then we do close at 3 AM.
Okay.
However, our other karaoke establishments, it's 4 AM. Actually, 15 years ago, the SLA allowed us to open until 6 AM, which, was pretty, and at that time, he kind of told us, hey, there's one, if you guys get in trouble, then all of our liquor license will be tied in, which we agreed, and we had no problems. We had no issues. But in any case, what I was trying to point out was that for us, it's for karaoke, it's more of a later crowd. People usually come from after dinner. And it's a lot of the parties groups we do get the reservations, or we also have a lot of walk-ins that are maybe around Koreatown having, some food, and they're like, hey, let's continue the party elsewhere to karaoke. So we noticed for us, we need to have that extra, few hours to make that sales revenue. We are a weekend business. That's when we make our money. So it is very important that the reason why we also decided to, open this new location was knowing the fact that we'll be open till 4 AM. So
And-
it's,
yeah, I think Jared and his father, they come from, the world of particularly CB5 and that where it was purely commercial and there were a lot of 4 AM licenses going. So all their other places have 4 AM licenses, and that's just kind of their business model across the board is to get, like Jared said, people that are, leaving dinner, going to a show and then going to a basketball game and then going to do karaoke after or something. So the majority of their business is going to be on the weekends, from, I don't know, let's say 10 PM and on, something like that.
Yeah, you're right.
This is a question for you, or the committee. So in the presentation, you mentioned that, or the way you phrased it was that the hours that the applicant is requesting are outside the guidelines from the board. It is my understanding that because this address is not in either of our restricted licensing areas, that there are no guidelines from the board for this address. This is not in the Broadway corridor, in other words, or in the RLA.
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Malone, but you're referring to sort of a tendency to push toward 2 AM
Right.
limitations, but I don't think it's
But there was
it's
no
not a
docu,
codified.
right, so like, I just want to be clear what we're saying when we say guidelines. So it's in neither of our restricted licensing
Mhm.
areas.
Right, no, you're right.
Yep.
Yeah. And to clarify, I forget if the hours were mentioned, but it's a 4 AM close every night of the week, just to clarify for everyone.
And just to kind of hone down on that a little bit more, as you said, at Den Social, you know, they may close at 3 on the weekends, that they have an unrestricted license, so that's kind of how we're thinking about it. I don't know necessarily that, you know, on a Monday in the dead of winter that they're gonna be open to 4 AM, but it's more just they could get a private party, they could get, you know, they would like the option to stay open till 4, 7 days a week.
Gotcha. Okay, I think that is going to be the main issue that we're gonna talk about tonight, the hours, so, other than that, are there any other questions on any other items from the committee members?
Catherine has a hand up.
Oh, Catherine, yes.
So I had a mix of a question. The first question is more like I guess I would frame it as what happens at 4 AM? Do a lot of people leave are a lot of people there? And are you gonna have a crowd on the street? What's been your experience about what happens at 4 AM? And the other part of this is some of this is the club is open for a long time. If you could refresh what the menu is like and the decibels, what decibel number were you working with? I thought I heard 95, but it's supposed to be a little lower than that. I'm not sure what I heard. So if you could confirm the decibels.
Sure, so I'll take Jared could weigh on this, but the crowd control, I don't think, as I'm sure you know, this is not the kind of place where people are gonna be stumbling out on the street. Most people are gonna be taking Ubers, cabs home. And it's gonna be, because it's not, you know, a club with lights on where everyone's kind of leaving at the same time. You'll have people kind of leaving at various times, so we don't anticipate kind of this 4 AM rush where just the place is lights on, everyone out.
Just
Is
for
that-
clarification, let me just say this. So it's not so much, it's not a club, but 10 people leaving at 4 AM. It's 4 AM. So the street is already quieter than what it would normally be in the middle of the day. And so what we find is that voices carry up and down the street. So it's that kind of, and you seem to have some 4 AM experience. So I just want to hear it in context to other locations, what it's been like at 4 AM. And
Right.
have there been 311 reports, that kind of thing?
No, so how, mostly our crowd, for the karaoke, they come as a group, right? So they're all either friends or family that come to sing together, and when they leave, they usually leave at the same time. And at that time, at 4 AM, you know, we do have, you know, it's not like our venue is full. We do have some customers that already left earlier. And when the customers do leave, our security guards are trained to make sure that they don't, you know, loiter or stick around. We, you know, make sure we're respectful to our neighbors for every location to keep the noise level down. So we try to, our security is trained to also have the customers to basically keep moving, not stick around in front of the storefront.
And we could also, you know, as people are leaving, I don't think it's an issue if they're calling Ubers to ask them to call them before they leave. Your question about the menu, was that for this location or for the one downstairs?
Is there more than a bag of chips? Like I received a menu of chips, I think, in the application. And I just
Right.
want to know, are you serving some light fare? If people going to be there for a long time and you're serving, you know, alcohol, the mix of the two helps.
Right,
crowd.
that menu, our establishments, none of them have a full kitchen.
Right.
Nor any like ventilation. For example, some location, the landlord doesn't allow gas. So
Okay.
we're very, you know, it's more of a pantry. So we do have, I think we added some more on top of that, like chicken skewers, yakitori,
Okay.
French. So there was some stuff, and the items that you're seeing, I didn't have a fully prepared menu finalized yet. We're working on that right now, actually. So once I do have a more final menu that we're working with the chef right now we're working with pretty much like air fryers, what we're able to use with
Sure.
electricity, right? So, it's a little bit difficult, but we will have a lot more, it will be bar food, finger food, but it will definitely be a lot more substantial than like potato chips and whatnot.
Yeah, I
Thank-
think some
Thank
of
you for the
some
clarification. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
of this is like maybe a little misleading just based on like the real estate of the page that's being, there's a lot of chips, but there's also at the bottom, you'll see there's the shumai,
Oh,
takoyaki.
one thing I forgot to add is we actually, for our karaoke duet locations, we actually allow customers to also bring outside food in and also order food. So, a lot of our neighbors are very happy that, we're adding, business for them. So a lot of pizzas are getting delivered to our private room. So that's one thing I forgot to mention. We also do allow outside food because we don't have, obviously, yeah, a substantial, food menu items.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Decibel question. The decibel level that I've recommended in the front common area, which has a storefront that's adjacent to the street, is 95 decibels. And so the windows don't open. It's a storefront. It's on the second floor with the expected attenuation of that window, which is about 45 decibels. The sound would be in the neighborhood of 50 decibels leaking out, which is lower than what the ambient noise
Okay.
would be, even at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I have measured the noise at 3 or 4 in the morning, not there, but in Midtown.
Okay. And so I just, so you understand I'm not being arbitrary. Between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., music from bars and restaurants may not exceed 42 decibels when measured from inside a nearby residence and can't really go over 7 decibels surrounding the area. So there is, I always point people to noise code that is already in the city, but it is remarkable that you've done a sound test and that you're hearing what seems to be within the limits. But just know that between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., there is a noise code. Thank you again.
Okay, I'd like to explain something as long as I have an audience of a dozen people. This is important. The New York City Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, are the ones who are supposed to enforce the noise code. I don't like noise myself. I work for a lot of people who make noise and people who don't want to hear noise. The city has a website where it has information, as she just suggested, which is wrong. It's incorrect. There's several sections of the noise code, which I worked on in 2005, and here's how it works. The section that she talks about does exist, that talks about the nighttime noise, which is defined as after 10 p.m. and before 7 a.m. 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. is considered night. Noise that is exceeding 7 decibels above the ambient, which is about not twice as loud, but maybe 60% subjectively louder than the background noise, is illegal, providing that it is not from some other source that is specifically regulated by another section of the code. And if you read the law, you'll see after those sections where they have those examples, it says this does not apply, where these decibel limits do not apply. This is 24-218B, and B has 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 are for nighttime noise, daytime noise, and impulsive noise. Impulsive noise is 24 hours. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but basically there is another section of the noise code that specifically regulates noise. It's called commercial music, and commercial music is regulated 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. There was a question that I often answer questions in the New York Times real estate section, the questions and answers. And Jill, who's the editor now, used to be Rhonda Kaysen, had a question from a reader and said, I live above a deli and they play loud music at night. And she wrote that exact same thing, which she got off the DEP's website, which is wrong. She said, and she answered the person saying, yeah, noise is regulated. You can't make noise above blah, blah, blah after 10 p.m. Wrong. You can't make it at any time. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you cannot exceed 45 decibels of bass, which is like, for you in the room, is like this. You can faintly hear 45 decibels of bass, and they have different frequencies, or 42 decibels in the mid-range, ignoring the bass, which is even quieter. You can't exceed that. And there's a third thing that really never actually applies. You can read about it on the first page of my report. That's the sections of the noise code. So it's not 10 PM to 7 AM. For music, it's 24/7.
Thank you.
Those examples that they gave
Seth, can I,
refer to other miscellaneous noises.
Seth, may I make just a point of clarification?
Yeah.
Thank
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So, I want to say what you're discussing is something like local law number 113. And what you're doing is exactly what we hope you do, is the expertise that you offer, we don't doubt, but what we understand is, we've had residents that have their own noise. You can now download apps to measure noise. But if you, as the expert, feel as if this noise doesn't impinge on the surrounding area, we appreciate your expertise. But what we will get is complaints if there are noise. This is an applicant who seems to have a history and understands how his business runs. But when you said 95 decibels, I said, what 95? So I'm glad for the clarification and the expertise. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So any other questions on anything that hasn't been covered yet? Yes.
This might be a technical question,
Uh-huh.
possibly maybe more for the committee, just for my understanding, maybe others. I was a little confused by the effect of the RLA's presence or not as it pertains to our guidelines around hours.
Okay.
I don't get it. So if
yeah.
you could just explain it for me, that or whoever else might be wondering.
Should we
Yes,
go
can-
into business session? and then-
Yeah, I think let's do that. Any
Okay.
other last questions? And I can explain that
Yeah,
at the beginning. Any other last questions? Nice. Okay, with this, we'll go into business session. So just for the applicant's sake, this will just be us discussing, and we may have a question for you during that process, but otherwise, we'll just discuss among the committee members.
And what, can I just ask when the full board meeting is?
The 12th.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, June 12th.
June 12th.
Okay. Are we expected to attend? Okay,
Not if you don't want.
okay.
And you can definitely stay in the room. This is just like, we'll just move into a different section of that.
We don't have the opportunity.
But they might have questions for us.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
no,
okay.
we would like.
Okay,
to
so we'll
just
stay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
So to start off the conversation on that, the RLA and the BCRLA are more restrictive sets of stipulations that only apply to a certain set of streets. So it's geographically bound, and if anything falls outside of that, they don't apply. So the RLA doesn't have an impact here.
Got it. Can I ask
Yeah.
but our guidelines would still apply?
We have a standard set of stipulations that we have in affidavits that we
Right.
like to see, so the sound study comes as part of that. And then the 2 AM thing, we've been just trying to push for applicants to be, at 2 AM or
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah.
unless things, unless there's reason to exceed it.
Okay.
So,
So that's still in effect, basically. We still would like in the affidavit for them to adhere to our guidelines, and
Yes.
they're gonna explain to us why it makes sense not to, of course.
exactly.
So tell me if you agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm quibbling with the word guideline. So I get,
Yeah,
I would argue
yeah.
we have two areas in the district
Right.
that have actual guidelines that have been voted on by the
Yeah,
board
yeah.
and agreed to by the board that exist.
Right.
Anywhere outside of that, it is informal norms, but do not exist as approved guidelines. So it may sound like a quibble, but I do think it matters.
Okay,
No, I agree. yeah.
okay.
So with that, I think, the main discussion then is around hours. So, as of now, the hours are until 4 AM. There are a couple locations nearby that are, close to that. I believe, there's a couple that are like 4 AM Thursday through Saturday. And then 2 AM during the week, like Sunday through Wednesday. Milan, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that there are ones on the street that are 4 AM. Every day of the week. but-
No, I'm not aware of anything like that, yeah.
Gotcha. So there's a couple options. We could seek to say like during the week, there's a bit of an earlier close time. It seems like the applicants have indicated that it's more weekend is very important to have that later hour. But during the week, not so much. Or we could go with 4 a.m. every day of the week. There's a couple options there. Curious to hear what people's thoughts are.
So I think this is an extremely cooperative and diligent applicant, and we have heard zero from the community to ask us to do otherwise, so I see no reason why not to grant the 4 a.m. every day.
Any other, yeah. hold on for a second.
Oh, I would agree with that. They've been extremely cooperative. Looking around the, physical area, yes, there is the Hollingsworth, residential building in the area. It's also set back a bit. I actually wasn't particularly concerned, so I feel like the sound study that you did was very exemplary. I think just given their track record, it seems like it does not seem like a big risk to the neighborhood or being disruptive, given the location and their past history and cooperation.
Any other, yeah, so,
I'm supportive of what has been said.
gotcha, perfect. Okay, any other comments on the hours? Gotcha. So
Hello,
it seems like-
Todd online. Can I make?
Oh, apologies, Todd. I'm gonna get used to paying attention to the screen over here. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
So during the due diligence process and the posting, so nothing hit the office and nothing came back from the residential buildings in the area, and there's no past history whatsoever, with sound from other places on that block. And did I hear somebody say that there were, maybe it was you, Seth, there were two others that are open till 3 p.m., 3 a.m., excuse me.
AM, yes. There was nearby, I saw, let me see. Highball Store, I believe was 2 a.m. 2 a.m. Sunday through Wednesday and 4 a.m. Thursday through Saturday. And then there was, that was the Rag Trader and Bo Peep cocktail and highball store. And then I believe the Keg Room is open late too, is somewhat nearby, 3 a.m. most nights. And then there was Monarch Rooftop, which is block south, which is open to 2 a.m. Sunday through Wednesday and 4 a.m. Thursday through Saturday. Those are the ones that are nearest that I found. So somewhat similar, but a bit earlier in most
So
cases.
what I have to add to this discussion, since we're outside of the RLA areas and the Broadway corridor, that we absolutely do have the discretion to go to 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. But looking back over the last several years, we've been really reluctant to allow any new really late night operations unless they were hotels or clear and convincing evidence based on the track record of the applicants and the history of the street, to allow it. So that's why I'm asking these questions. And the other thing is, for those who are new on the committee, it's not always the case that meeting the city requirements and the city code requirements on noise are definitive for us. We always have the discretion as a community board if a specific situation or the peculiar arrangement of the site or the interaction of a particular building generates a lot of notice to try to persuade different hours, at least during the week and the weekend, to protect the neighborhood. How many residential buildings are on the block, or is it just mostly commercial? Do we know?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Valon, but I believe it's just the Hollingsworth on the end of the block. That's correct.
Did the due diligence team, attempt to go into that building?
They did a-
And
We did. I actually dropped off the notices in the building there. So they placed it in the lobby area so the residents could
Okay, so I would just say that we should exercise the greatest caution before, wading through a 4 AM license like this. And, that's at the discretion of the committee.
Thank you, Todd.
I just want to reiterate, Todd, just to be clear, or excuse me, I'll adjust that comment to the chair. Of course, we have the discretion to do whatever we want. I think because this applicant has met the high bar that Todd presents, and because as of now, literally not a single person has asked us to do otherwise, I think it's totally warranted.
And I do actually, to Todd's earlier question around comments from the community, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest here, but I believe we haven't gotten any comments from the outreach that we've done.
Except the positive, we got,
Except for the
we got a positive comment.
Positive comments, yeah.
That's right.
Perfect, thank you. All right, with that, I think we have sort of come to a consensus around many of the things. I just want to like poll people on hours very quick. So I think 4 AM is a little safer Thursday through Saturday. That's usually the days that we keep it a bit later. If the committee could raise their hand if they're comfortable with 4 AM Thursday through Saturday, that'd be great. Thursday through Saturday. I think we've got. Okay, I think we've got that. And then any comments on that? Any more comments to add there?
Wait, sorry, but why not Sunday through Wednesday?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna go to that next.
Oh,
I just wanna
okay,
make sure
sorry.
that everybody's got their input there.
I
Okay,
have
and
a
then-
comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Would the applicant be open to doing it a little earlier on Thursday through Saturday, or Monday or Sunday through Wednesday? Because customarily, as Seth, I think he's getting at this point, that we try to draw that distinction if the applicant is willing.
I think, obviously, we want to work with you. Our preference is really to have 4 AM 7 days a week. I mean, maybe if we could agree to close a little earlier on Sunday, if that, kind of gets us across the line. And again, the Sunday through Wednesday is really the right to do that, and the right to stay open later. We don't expect to be open that late on a regular basis, but having the ability to do so for a private event or something like that is crucial to the success. So seeing that there's kind of some support for the 4 AM, we'd like to at least pursue that first and see if we.
So it seems like we do have in the committee support for 4 AM Thursday through Saturday, but I do want to poll again on the Sunday through Wednesday. So who would be interested to see the applicant close earlier than 4 AM on Sunday through Wednesday? Please raise your hand. If you'd like to close, if you'd like it to close earlier, like 3 AM.
Be a nice to have.
Nice to have.
Yeah,
That
I
counts.
could do too.
3 AM. Todd's interested in that. It seems like we've got. So it seems like we've got some interest in a 3 AM, maybe a 3 AM close. Yeah. I would advocate for 4 AM. I mean, who would prefer 4 AM? If you could raise your hand, over 3. Like a strong preference.
7 days a week.
7 days a week. Yeah, sorry, 7 days a week. Gotcha. Okay, so we're sort of on the fence there, but I think we could be at the point where we could make a motion one way or another and kind of see what happens. But I'm open to having zone offense.
I have like a comment proposal, and I don't know if the applicants will want to entertain those, but given there is like some sense on the CV that like an earlier close would be preferable, and it sounds like at some of their other locations, there is a concept of bundling multiple licenses together, like if the applicant is willing to represent, they will be good operators, otherwise, like when their other licenses come up for renewal, will, reflect the experience of this location. Maybe with that mechanism, more folks would be open to 4 AM, but defer to others on the committee, and certainly, yeah.
I think that's smart.
So bundle it, okay, that makes sense.
Seth?
Yes, go ahead, Todd.
Okay, so just one other thing, which I would urge the committee to consider is, and again, this is nothing against the applicant, but the precedential effect I'm just thinking again about, you know, the many applications the committee has heard over the years. The precedential effect of allowing the 4 AM, even for the best operators, without trying to make a distinction between, especially when there is a residential place on the block, you know, is important. It's a factor to be considered. And you never know, me personally, if they would agree to like 2 AM, Sunday through Wednesday, and 4 AM, you know, Thursday through Saturday, that would at least being somewhat consistent, and setting a precedent on that block, because we know we're gonna get other applications. And if they're all, you know, they're gonna look at this and they're going to, you know, want equal treatment. So, but that's just a factor to consider.
Thank you, Todd. I think we had Libby next in the room.
Okay, so I think that it's generally, it makes sense, and it generally, like, to keep it at 4 AM, 7 days a week, because unlike other applications where we've had any community support being against it or concerned about it, that you've really done a good job of doing the sound study and making sure that you're a good partner, and are taking the necessary steps, and then also went and got favorable. We are in favor, we are okay with these hours. I think that like, I'm comfortable with that, considering there's no community feedback, but I do think that having some mechanism, making sure that someone is like very available to be super responsive, so that residents can get in touch with you to like immediately address problems or take additional steps for like additional sound mitigation, so that you can still operate, like, so that everybody's happy.
Gentlemen,
I think makes the most sense. It's mostly about like responsiveness, I think, is to address anything that comes up. Otherwise, I don't think the hours sound.
Jared, I don't
unreasonable.
want to speak out of turn, but
But-
you're happy to provide your contact info, right? To any
Absolutely,
speaker.
yeah.
Perfect.
I agree with Libby, and just to reiterate, like, I don't think we should seek earlier hours for the sake of it. We're here to find balance and represent the community. The community has spoken, the community is happy with 4 AM here, so I'm happy with 4 AM.
Gotcha. And,
One other comment,
Hold on.
oh, one moment, Aviva, you're on.
I see your point, Todd. That's what I was gonna say, about the precedent setting, just, giving 7 days a week, 4 AM. That's pretty unusual for us, so far as I know. And I think, Mr. Ham said he would be open to a 3 AM closing on those Sunday to Wednesday or Sunday to Tuesday. I mean, so, I think that's probably a good compromise, because I am mindful of that, just setting this 7 day a week, 4 AM closing. There will be more applicants down the line. So, but I'll go with what the group.
Thank you.
I will just add that I think there's so few places where it would make sense to have 4 AM, 7 days a week in terms of midtown blocks that only have one single residential building.
That's right.
And where you don't get complaints and where you actually have residents like
In
supporting
favor
it.
of it.
Right.
So I think it might be setting a precedent, but there's so few other situations where this precedent would apply that
Right.
probably is not consequential. But I hear your point, Todd.
one other thing I want to,
We had, sorry, Todd, I think we had Catherine first, and then I'll go to you
oh,
next.
okay.
Thank you. So, I do not believe that this is just an arbitrarily set 4 AM, that the applicant has done some due diligence with the sound, with the fact that we've not heard comment. I think all of this has to be said out loud to set us up against the idea that this is an arbitrary 4 AM, that there isn't the density. Sometimes we have, 4 or 5 clubs on a block that all have 4 AM closings, which make for a lot of late noise. So I think that it is important to express the fact that we did not hear any comment from residents against this, that we did have they did have neighbors who were for it. So that's always the good balance. And that we're not backing away from in high residential areas where we have an RLA, there is a 4 a.m. closing. We're not backing away from we still don't like, it's still not favorable, but it's not, we're striking a balance. And in this particular case, at this specific time, there is the opportunity to grant 4 a.m. I'm not sure downstairs it's closed at 3 the hours downstairs are different from upstairs, but I think that's unrelated. So I just and that's another business model for them. So, I would be in this particular case for the 4 a.m. closing. Given the capacity of the club, it's not a large space. It's, there are a lot of factors that allow us to look at this if that's what they're requesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I think we'll go to Todd for one last comment here and then we'll try to have a resolution. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Just one last thing very quickly, which is that, again, I think everybody understands the issue of precedent, and this particular applicant is, I think, well within, is a responsible operator, and there's no issue with complaints from the immediate neighborhood. But the only other thing, and this is something I've learned over the years, is that once somebody gets a license, it's almost impossible to roll it back, right? It becomes almost an automatic renewal. And if we look around the city, right, the trend is ever more mixed commercial and residential across our district. So some thought should be given to how the block and the neighborhood may change, and the precedent that we're setting here. Even if it's just a small difference, it's not that it's bad now, but how we act and the licenses that we grant de novo or on renewal is going to affect our ability and events going forward. So again, just a comment that we should give some thought to how that block may change, especially with the conversion of commercial to residential and all the things going on in the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. So with that, I think I have a sense of where people are at. Does somebody want to make a motion? Especially Milan. Oh, yeah. No, sorry.
Do you want to make a motion?
I've never made a motion.
Make a
You have
motion
the most details, I think.
I make a motion to do a resolution that's a deny unless all of the stipulations that have already been agreed to, 4 a.m., 7 days a week, and the language that Zona, sort of spoke to about like looking at the totality of the licenses if there's any issue.
Gotcha. And do we have a second?
Second.
Gotcha. All right.
The update.
What?
This goes into the update, right? Or are we doing it that one?
No.
Yes.
Okay, just making
those
sure
are all
that-
the stipulations.
Yeah,
That's the
okay.
deny.
Yeah, we've been working on that.
Yeah.
For new members, this all,
Articulated.
this will be discussed.
All the things he said.
We'll go into an affidavit, which we'll sign with the applicant, and then, that'll be sort of enforced and that'll be our position. Okay, so with that, I think we'll take it to a vote.
Okay, can we just, I need to be reminded, what was it that Zona was recommending?
That,
Yes.
I think it's that, we're outlining that this is not precedent setting because the operator is like good in all these ways, and that we will going forward, look at their portfolio of liquor license holistically if, they're a bad operator at this or at the other locations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
Right.
so do I just call out the name?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Not you. You are abstained, okay. Catherine Ellington.
Oh, I think
I
I
do,
do.
no.
You don't have.
Yes.
Only Brad does that, but if
Oh,
that,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So
Sorry.
I'm a yes.
Only to break a tie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Libby,
Yes.
you're not present, Milan,
Yes.
Yaron?
Yes.
Thomas isn't here, right? Okay,
Correct.
Todd Shapiro,
Yes.
BJ,
Yes.
me, yes. Zona,
Yes.
Alan?
Yeah.
Okay, great, it's unanimous.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Huge. Okay, so with that, we will move on to the next application here. So we have 21 West 35th Street
Wow.
doing
You can
business
point
as
to other
Bar Chef in
applicants
New
and
York.
Say, do your homework first. Do
And
your homework first.
I'll-
No,
congrats.
non-residential.
I'll quickly describe the process we'll follow for this
Yeah.
and the other items.
Have a positive as well as, you know.
First, we'll start by having Zona quickly summarize the agreement.
Good to see you again.
So just to contextualize, in many meetings, we actually hash out the details like we just did. But for this one, Zona was able to sort of reach an agreement offline with the applicant. And so that is a signed affidavit. And for those, we just summarize it at the meeting very quickly and then we can vote on the affidavit.
We can vote on this with the like the full board still, because there wasn't any like community meeting or like controversy about this.
Yes, so we got guidance. We haven't always done this, but we got guidance, I believe it was in the last couple of months that, it's just, even if we have a full affidavit, just to get a vote here and at the full board.
Sounds good.
So yeah, I'll pass it off to Zona, take a quick.
So, this is for a bar that's seeking to be opened on 35th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. The brand is Bar Chef and they operate like a high-end cocktail bar in Toronto and they're opening a New York location. So they are seeking a license to operate. I think the hours, correct me if I'm wrong, that they asked for were like maybe like 4 AM close all days of the week, and they are on the 4th floor of the building, so there's like a high-end hot pot place on the ground floor. We got like a couple comments, not too much on the neighbors, from the neighbors, just generally expressing concern with noise in the area. There is like a 4 AM operator right next to them, and there's another bar on the street, I believe, that has like a 4 AM or like also like a late night 2 AM license. But we don't have like a ton of affidavits on the block. So ultimately, the applicant agreed that they would operate no later than 2 AM Wednesday, Saturday, no later than 1 AM Sunday through Wednesday, which is a bit later than the 2 and 12 that we historically have tried to advocate for on these mixed use blocks. They're also agreeing to limit special events to corporate events, no more than 24 times a year, and that's really to accommodate, you know, all of the events that happen during a holiday season in December. And all their events will be closed by 10 PM. And as always, I think the stipulations state that they will adhere to the sound code, the various noise pose regulations, and meet with neighbors on like a constant basis, just to ensure that they're compliant and respectful of needs in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Zona. So any questions or comments from the committee on the affidavit? All right, perfect. Seeing none, any comments? I may have already just asked for that, but any comments? All right, perfect. I think we can actually, we're in business session, but if anybody wants to make a motion to just to essentially adopt the affidavit or to accept it, that's the next step here.
I'll make a motion to accept the affidavit.
Sure. Second, perfect. All right, with that, I think we can take it to a vote.
Yay. Okay, Seth,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Libby,
Yes.
Milan,
Yes.
Yaron,
Yes.
Todd,
Yes.
BJ,
Yes.
me, yes, Zona,
Yes.
Alan.
Yeah.
Okay, it's unanimous again.
Nice. All right, thank you, Yoda, and thank you, Zona. That's an awesome affidavit. Okay, the last thing on our agenda is the RLA discussion. So As I mentioned at the outset, this won't result in an actual resolution. It'll just be a discussion to determine the next steps for the RLA task force. I'll just give a quick, like, high-level summary of this, and then I'll let Yaron take it away. But for those who don't know, RLA is restricted licensing area, and it's a set of more restrictive stipulations that we apply to applications for establishments on 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd streets, between 5th and 6th Avenues, and also between 20th and 21st streets between Broadway and Park Avenue South. So it's only within that geography. These stipulations require certain hours. So it's midnight last seating, 1 a.m. Midnight last seating Sunday through Wednesday, and then 1 a.m. last seating Thursday through Saturday. Requires a size of less than 4K square feet for patron use, full kitchen, and then there's a few other stipulations. And these, as we've discussed earlier in the meeting, are sort of more restrictive than for other areas that we usually see. So with that initial introduction, I'll hand it off to Yaron, who will sort of walk us through what work has been done on the RLA.
Yeah,
task.
so the purpose of discussing this tonight is to get the committee's input on how to move forward, if at all, with this task force. So the task force was created, conversations with myself and Janice and Miles and Brad. The overall goals were to create a single and updated affidavit that we could use for every establishment in the RLA. We do have RLA guidelines, but there was a lot of establishments that had been grandfathered in or were operating under disparate affidavits. And the goal was to have one unifying affidavit that would get all new applicants on, and also as older applicants came up for renewal, get them on it as well. So the first thing we sort of needed to do was, and we being myself, Yoden, Christopher, Samir, and Zona, first thing we need to do is sort of understand the lay of the land, like what's happening in the RLA. And by the way, the RLA, for those who don't know, I'm not talking about the Broadway corridor, I'm talking about the one that's 19th to 22nd. I like kind of messed it. Yeah, 19th to 22nd. 5th. No, it's there's a little piece that's across Broadway and then all the way to 6th. So let me just give a brief history. The RLA actually began almost 25 years ago. In its current iteration, it dates to, I think, 2011, when the board was noticing what it considered to be a proliferation of late night club operations, like Limelight. I mean, this is like that era. It starts 25 years ago, and like other clubs, and the neighborhood was becoming increasingly also, it's still mixed zoned, but it's increasingly residential, and there was a proliferation of those clubs, and there were some tensions there. There currently are, I still think, 4 late night operations on 21st between 5th and 6th, and a few more on 20th between 5th and 6th. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is figure out like what's actually happening in the RLA. So Yoden and Christopher and a bunch of us working on like gathering sort of the anecdotal information. So there's an active neighborhood association that gave us a lot of feedback about what's happening. Like the blocks should be close to traffic, should not be close to traffic. There's garbage from food trucks on 6th Avenue. Like we're getting all the information about all the issues. There are a lot of public safety concerns. There had been a few weapons issues on the block late at night, et cetera, et cetera. And so there was collecting that information. And then the harder piece, which is what Zona and Samir bravely sort of began to do, was also like, can we get some hard data that isn't anecdotal about what's happening there? Like, does it have an increased number of 311 calls than other parts of the district? Like, also, has the RLA worked? Like, it's been in existence for almost 25 years. Like, can we claim that it's worked or not, right? That proved much more difficult from a data perspective. Zona did a wonderful job on the 311 side. We didn't necessarily see sort of more density of calls in the RLA, but the data is hard, and it would take a lot of time and perhaps a fellow to collect for us. So that's as far as we got. And then we realized a few things. One, the difference between an RLA affidavit and a regular affidavit is actually pretty small. There are 3 things that are different. One, the hours. Two, we ask everyone in the RLA to have a full kitchen, and that sort of dates back to the time that we were really preventing there be like clubs that weren't serving food. And we have a square footage restriction at 4,000. So technically anything over 4,000, we say we're going to say no to. Over time, we've looked at that a little differently because again, that assumes that any use over 4,000 is a nightclub. And it's turned out now that there's movie theaters and other theater like that, that's actually not the case anymore. Those are the only three things that are different. Two of those we've sort of fudged on, so that just leaves hours. So the question is, do we need this unified, what do we do? Like, do we need this unified affidavit for the RLA? Is there just a unified affidavit for the entirety of our district that we just leave the hours blank and that becomes a case by case, or we have guidelines for the RLA, but then I sort of don't know what the goal is anymore. We have had no luck getting grandfathered operators to agree to new affidavits. They'll agree to like some stipulations here and there, but they have no incentive to. They're still operating with their 4 a.m.s and their old affidavits. It's unclear to me how to move forward and what the committee wants out of this work, if anything at all. I think, noble ideas of would like to even understand is the geography of the RLA even drawn properly, given how the district has changed. That requires, I think, a deep dive of data that we're going to need a lot of time and energy for. And I don't know who's going to do that work or how we're going to do that work. So this is more of a, how should we proceed? And what is the best way for us and the best way for residents? Like, I would say my opinion is that there are still issues on 20th and 21st Street. Are there issues on 19th? Are there issues on 23rd? I don't know. I don't know if the district is drawn properly, and that we need to be aware of. We can still, I think it's fine to still recommend and think about reduced hours there, and I think we should. But is the affidavit itself a document that's going to be so distinct and different from the rest? And should we think about, easing the sort of explicit restrictions on full kitchen and size when we've been doing that as a board anyway? So I guess that's where my head's at, is like, I don't know that we need, I think we can say it's the same affidavit, but with earlier hours, and that might be good enough. But I would like to think about how the district is drawn, and that would take a lot of work.
Gotcha. Thank you, Yarn. So with that, we will go into questions from the committee first. Let's go with, I think I saw Todd first, and then I'll go ahead, Todd.
You're muted, Todd.
Oh, yeah, you're muted.
So are we still in questions or?
Questions. Yeah.
Okay, I'll hold off until comments.
Gotcha. Okay. And then Libby, was that a question?
I have a question. I guess maybe it is a comment, but it's soliciting a comment. Is what the problems still exist. We haven't been effective at getting these, it's still sort of but my understanding is it's the hell half hour, 45 minutes, where it's mostly fine when everybody's inside, but it's those few times a year when people are outside. Is that not the case at all?
So the problem, according to resident, no. The issue, according to residents, is not 3:30 to 4:30 with people exiting or something.
Okay.
The issue, according to residents, is for the most part one of noise and crowd control, but throughout the evening. I think there is club hopping that happens when you have a density of clubs. And I think it is mostly about street noise, not interior noise. Some places, and Josh,
the
keep me
street part
honest
of it
here,
I was aware of.
but it's exterior street, it's people on the streets, these blocks, going between clubs, being rowdy with their groups outside of clubs. That is predominantly the issue. There are other issues. There are sanitation issues, there are drop-off issues, but the main issue is that. What I would say, what's really challenging about that is that this is mixed use zoned. These clubs have been in operation for well before there was maybe any residential on the block. We can't, our goal is not to reduce the density of clubs on the block. that may be some of the residents' goal, I won't put words in their mouth. Our goal is to help it be managed better. We've taken a lot of steps to talk to NYPD. We've talked to, and NYPD has a good relationship, I hope now with the neighborhood association, to try to see what they can do with enforcement. There's a lot of discussion of should the block be cordoned off or not. So those sort of mitigating steps we can take, but to solve the problem, it's really hard for me to understand what that would actually look like.
Okay, that's a good follow.
Yeah, and then
Todd,
Catherine will be next.
Okay,
Yeah.
just a follow-up to that is sort of the solving of the problem. I think this goes to your comments about like the amount of research required, is that if there's a different scenario, if this is an ongoing problem, it's not that sort of hellish half hour. I know that there are other establishments that I've certainly worked on where they're like hellish half hour is like the hour and it'll be like 6:30 in the afternoon. And it's still a huge problem because then it creates the whole thing throughout the day that if the time piece of the RLA is one of the things that we sort of go on, it's like the size of looking at it, but like the hours are really where it's come up for us. That hours of early close, I guess my question is there any, I mean, this is the thing that requires too much research, too big of a lift. If it's club hopping, if the close is still at 2, wouldn't there likely still be club hopping, but just until 2, it would just happen earlier in the night?
Probably,
question.
but the issue is who's gonna agree to 2, and these are all grandfathered 4 AM operations.
I'm just saying, even hypothetically,
Right.
if that is the thing, if someone were to agree to 2, would that seem to address sort of the root of the problem? And it sounds like the answer to that is
Maybe, I don't know.
probably not.
I mean, the question before, I don't want Todd and Catherine obviously have their hands up. I guess the only thing I would say is leaving the current establishments out of it, we can look at, what would we say to a new application? And that's really what our RLA guidelines are for. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that would solve it, but I think the idea that we're gonna get current 4 AM operators down to 2 it's like, that's just not gonna happen. And would that even solve the problem is your question, and I don't know that would solve the problem. I think there would still be noise issues. It would solve some of the problem, certainly,
Okay.
because those noise issues are then happening at 1 and not 3.
Thank you. But with that, we'll go on to Catherine next.
Yeah, so I want to just make a comment on the backside of
Oh, sorry, did you have any, Catherine, sorry, before we move on to comments, does anybody else have any questions?
yeah.
Oh, I have a question.
Sorry, Catherine, we'll move on to comments in just a
Okay,
second.
that's fine.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
How many, since we have no luck with no success with the grandfathered organizations, how many new applicants how many new license applications are we getting? Are there? I mean, I remember that salon or.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But apart from that,
we get a few, but most of them are like,
Restaurants, right?
yeah, like Italian restaurants, came in the other day, delis. The salon was probably the one that had the most, I would say, controversy to it.
And I think the salon is a great example of why I think there's something a little that needs fixing. For those who don't know, a nail salon came to us and they wanted to serve drinks. They are in the RLA. They do not have a full kitchen because they are a nail salon. And we stuck to our guidelines, which we did. I'm not criticized for us, but we put this poor nail salon through a couple months of rigmarole when, like, okay, it's a nail salon, like, and so just because they were in the RLA and did not have a full kitchen. So I think we're seeing some more of these alternate uses than I think we did 15 years ago as a board, and I think it's part of this. Anyway, sorry.
Nice. With that, Todd, did you have a question or was that a comment?
I want a comment.
Oh, actually, I'll go then. Any other questions before we move to comments? All right, nice. And I think we had Catherine first, and then I'll go back to you, Todd, for comments.
I appreciate the space you're on and to the task force to reflect on what we could be doing and to think about it. So over time, what I would say is that there are conditions in which a grandfathered 4 a.m. could be talked into something else, especially if they've had a long history with the neighborhood, they've had complaints. We've seen some of, we've heard some of these. The other part of this is even with places that are non-clubs, restaurants, I think we heard a movie theater. Some of these are still about what is in the density of the area, the number of establishments operating to 4 a.m. and the residential mix. And I think that it is a futuristic time in that there are things changing, but I guess I do remember a time when these neighborhoods were quite different. And so in terms of the level of noise that one might see all night long. And so, what I wanted to say is that there was an operator who had experience at other locations over the city. And he actually, a lot of the case for the 4 a.m. has to do with, I entertain the restaurant community, so they need to come. We have late hours for those kinds of things. And he was willing to step back from 4 a.m. And I think it's a conversation. I don't know how it's, I don't know that we can put it in a bag. And that's what, and I think the conversations just have to be had, and sometimes they take a long time. And
sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
And I do think that I often bring up, it's not, it's the club hopping, but it could be we saw a restaurant that was on a corner. They had 15, 20 people coming outside at, 4 a.m. and the neighbors were like, it's like a party outside because it's so quiet at that hour. So some of those kind of situations still make me see the value in the RLA. And it also just, it puts a cover, it's a restrictive part of what we do, but it also has value. And as the landscape of these establishments change and buildings change and more residents come in, I think we hold this for, and we still ask more questions. Maybe there are more questions to ask. So. Mhm.
Thank you,
Catherine.
We'll go to you.
Yeah, I just think it's important to narrow this conversation tonight. Catherine, I totally hear you. Let me just be clear about what I'm asking. Tonight's conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, is not about the validity of the RLA. We're not talking about whether we want the RLA, we don't want the RLA. Let me be clearer in my question. My question is, what do we need an RLA task force for? And if the answer is nothing.
Okay, the people of the task force.
Correct. So
what should be your agenda or your mission?
Correct. And if there is none except sort of keeping things out there with the RLA, that's fine. Then we should disband the task force. So this just came up. It was like, I am not sure. We technically have this task force on the books. I just explained that we're sort of stuck, and I feel Yoden and others like, what are we doing as a task force? Should we recommend to Brad that we disband it? So the conversation of whether we keep the RLA or not, I think is an interesting one. Let's table that for another day.
Thank you. You're right.
But thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. With that, we'll go to Todd. Yeah. Todd, you're up next.
Okay, so, first of all, I know it seems hard, and I'm well familiar with my years on the PSQL and now SLAP with the problem of the grandfathered establishments. And they are obdurate and they refuse to give up what they have. However, in the 25 years that we've had it, it has been remarkably effective in limiting the most blatant problems that have come up in the RLA. The limelight and some other bad actors, and the due diligences that I remember with some of these establishments, trying to persuade them. But overall, just having those guidelines and sticking to them, consistently, and even with the non-clubs and the just straight restaurants has been enormously beneficial. And we should definitely keep it. I do think it's worth keeping the task force together. And we do need the data. It's been a while. I was actually putting together a collection of my old documents, which I want to create a digital archive for the new people coming on board that I've collected since I'm on SLAP and the other committees. And one of the things they did is they went out, as Yaron said, they did go out and do a tremendous amount of granular data. We should get a intern, right? That's what several of our other community boards have done, because we don't have the time to do it. The task force members don't have the time to do it, but we should immediately apply for an intern that we can have work under the direction of the task force to start collecting the data. And all they have to do is look at the original report and just update that data. I suspect that what it would find is that a lot of the things have changed because there's more residential than ever, and probably will be more residential. You know, as far as what the task force, what they should do, I think Yaron has it exactly right. I think that there should be a portion, the data we collect and the kind of things we look for in the due diligence should be set up as an addendum or addition to the RLA standards, right? Because you may recall the movie theater or a nail salon, and we should revise it and make note of these different uses that are coming up and possibly apply different standards to them. However, a few things should not change. And going back to our previous discussion, the trend should be earlier and less, earlier times for all. And one of the things that I noticed is that it's not impossible. It's not impossible to get the grandfathered applicants to come to reason about their late hours. Because what's happened, it's gotten so bad on some of those blocks in the RLA that their own staff and members can't safely come and go. The crowds and whatever makes it impossible for their own staff and allow them to conduct their own business effectively. So it's a collective action problem. Nobody wants to give up their 4 a.m. close, but the reality is their businesses would run more efficiently and they make a better contribution to the neighborhood given the increasing residential nature of the place if they would all agree to do it. Now, our job as a community board is to take the long view and to use our bully pulpit to make it clear that our position is unchanged, right? And that we do not recommend late hours going forward for anybody, right? Unless there's, a very specific reason with a new use, like we did with the movie theater, right? And that we are opposed. Look, the community, every liquor license has to come up for revision after the interval, and we should be consistent, and we should make clear that we're not going to recommend approval with the current hours given the change, the issues in the neighborhood. And this goes back to what I said earlier, which is that once you get approval for a liquor license, it's really hard to change it.
Thank you, Todd.
So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, we're not, again, I really want to focus tonight not on the merits of the RLA, but around what this so it sounds like from what you're saying, you think we should have a task force that's primarily devoted to data collection. I think that's fine. I don't know that we need a task force for that. I think we can figure out how to do that. And then whether it's an intern or someone can come back to the committee to present that data. I'm not sure. We shouldn't have an open-ended task force that doesn't have a very specific task and goal.
Yeah.
So in that case, I would recommend disbanding. And again, I know that's just one suggestion, but
It's my sense from what people have said so far that I think we agree that the hours should remain earlier. I think there remains a problem. But the other stipulations, I think many of us have seen that they don't always make sense and they aren't always useful. So I think like the one purpose of the committee going forward may be to recommend changes to the existing stipulations.
I think that's fine. I think if the task force continues and its job is to review the existing stipulations to see if they're still valid, I think that's fine. I still am a little bit at a loss of how to get some of the necessary data to make. I think we can do it. I really crave some data to justify the stuff because it's a lot of vibes and it's a lot of like, sorry, I know, Alan.
Oh, sorry, yeah, actually, I'll quickly respond to that. I think the one thing is we do know that certain stipulations, I think, like size, for example.
Right.
I don't know if I found in some applications that it doesn't necessarily help us get what we need out of.
Right, and could revise size to like used space, which
Exactly.
we've done, because sometimes the space is very big, but they're only using a certain portion. of it.
So there could still be some use without data, but yeah, I see your point. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I think presuming that the RLA can remain intact with the RLA affidavit in place, that there's no reason why the task force couldn't be disbanded until a further time when enough data is collected for it to be reconstituted or even on an ad hoc basis. It just seems like, given the changes of the neighborhood, that the RLA district may not fully reflect all it wants to, and that even if that geography were fully captured currently, that the affidavit is not really achieving its aims potentially.
Right,
So
potentially, we don't know,
in
right?
all these kind of open-ended things, I don't know that I don't know that it's the best use of the task force's time to remain constituted at this point.
But who's gonna do that work?
So I think
Sorry, I don't know if you saw.
any other, yeah, so.
Kevin. So I just have two quick, there are questions, I know it's comments, but.
Yeah, no.
Are there any external stakeholders that are active, involved with the task force at this point?
So, yes, so the task force has been strong, like very connected to a neighborhood association on 20th and 21st Street, representing the residents. And we've had individual, I mean, Josh can also speak to this, and then we've built individual relationships with specifically the operators of the 4 a.m. clubs. So they're obviously stakeholders. We've also convened meetings with those parties. We've also reached out to the Office of Nightlife which is a sort of organization that tries to sort of mediate issues between residents and commercial operations. They ran a meeting for us. So we've done a lot of discussion with those two and NYPD. So those 3 groups.
And do they want this task force to move in?
I think what the residents want is for their neighborhood to be quieter and cleaned up.
Yeah, but
Whether that's a task force or not, I think they don't care. Right. I don't think anyone cares with the task force. Everyone wants the outcome they want.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I heard you say that there are all these stakeholders that are active in the task force. So if I'm a neighbor, and a resident in a community and I'm coming to task force meetings, or I'm active in a task force, and then all of a sudden it goes away, and like, what the heck?
Totally fair enough. I think
So
we would
I'm
have to, yeah.
Do they have a preference?
Yeah, they don't come to meetings. They are active in the sense that we communicate with them. We would still communicate with them as a committee or Josh as the district.
Okay.
With that communication link would not be lost, but that's a totally fair point.
Thanks. Yeah.
my experience being on this is that the community, the residents are extremely active and well organized. And frustrated with us,
Correct,
looking at us like, what are
What
you
you
doing?
doing?
correct,
Can't you do something better? Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
I agree with that. Characterization.
And more, just actually clarification on my end, more with the grandfathered organizations, or is that with,
Yeah.
Correct,
Oh, sure.
correct.
Thank you. Okay, so it's, my sense there's two options. One is to, have the task force take a look at what stipulations they can, remove things that aren't as relevant, and keep it going for now. Or the second thing is to disband it and request data, which may involve bringing in an intern to do that, that work.
I mean, I think the task force can exist for another month or two. If its very narrow goal is to make recommendations to this committee
Yeah.
of things in the near term we might want to change about the affidavit, the committee can approve those changes, it can deny those changes. And then I agree with Alan that like, it would be great to find I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Great. Then we disband it or it goes on the back burner. And then I agree with Alan, like, we need to find a way to get the information that we need in order to properly determine are the boundaries drawn where they should be? Has this had an effect? It like, all of those questions that we sort of can't figure out right now.
Sort of sounds like a good motion, but yeah.
For my own clarification, RLA or no RLA, task force or no task force, if we have an operator that is having a deleterious effect on the neighborhood, our leverage is via their liquor license application, if we were to review their 311 calls, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
So it feels like to me, all the other stuff doesn't even really matter if it seems like the RLA itself doesn't even matter versus is this a bad actor in the neighborhood?
So,
Right, and I'm just trying to wrap my head up.
So a couple of things on that. So so there's already existing operations and there's future operations. So the RLA guidelines exist for future applicants. When we're talking about, I think we need to be careful with our language or talk about there are bad actors. There are really two sides to that story. And some of these operators believe that they are operating well. The NYPD tells us they are operating well and have been operating for a very long time. Well, residents disagree. It is not clear cut. The other thing is we've been told directly by SLA that renewals, that trying to get involved in a renewal is not really going to do anything. In other words, that renewals are effectively a rubber stamp process. I'm happy to say it's in a public meeting.
Okay.
Because I think it's unfortunate. And so if there really is a problem operator, then we need to elevate 311 and other NYPD issues to the SLA and they will look at it. That's sort of separate than a little bit than what we're talking about.
Yeah. Can I come?
Was there any other questions really quick, and then we can go back? Did you have a question?
Melissa.
Sorry. There was a
I just wanted to make a comment. So that's why we ask, are you being a good neighbor is the question, as opposed to, and what determines a good neighbor? What the SLA said to me a long time ago is, the good neighbor rule starts in the first 500 feet. That's your first community. And so I just wanted to make that clarification when we were talking about bad actors versus good neighbors. That's why we're asking, are you a good neighbor?
Thank you, Catherine. And then, Melissa, too.
So I think it is a question. I think if the question right now for the task force is like, what is our direction and where are we going? In order to answer that, I guess the question I would have is to have a clear sense of what you need to answer in order to get to that like vision.
So
You have a sense of like what data you need or what even the questions are. And so if the answer to that is no, then maybe it might be worth considering spending time within, like, if you're gonna keep it together for another month or two, really honing in on that versus if you already have that and like we've reached this stopping point and we can't go any further because we have clarity in terms of what we need. then I think to spend sooner, focus on getting the data to answer those questions. And then really like have a targeted purpose. Right, so question and comment.
I mean, I think that's a really good idea. I mean, I'm happy for there to be two deliverables, like recommendations in the affidavit and also a list of here's things we'd like to know. Yeah. And somebody will find it.
And yeah, one last one that we can go to. I think what I'm struggling to understand is how we can ultimately affect change, like what are the levers?
Yeah, that's
So-
hard too.
And so I think if we were to, whether it's via a task force or bringing an intern on board, collecting data, check, I'm a data person, love it. And understanding the situation with as much detail as we can, but I think I'd like to understand what practical, realistic levers do we have to actually help, even in some incremental way, improve things, and even if it's a small thing.
Yeah, I think we've been able to, I think our biggest lever here, honestly, is we can look at how we're gonna handle future applications, which is what we have now. And then in terms of the situational around is to convene, which we do. And to connect residents and operators, to connect residents with NYPD, to connect, like, that's like they've developed direct relationships, and that's good. Like, everyone should be talking, and that's, so there's a lot of discussion now about whether the block on 21st Street between 5th and 6th should be closed to traffic or not on Fridays and Saturday nights. And then we tried it, and then, you know, the residents are like, oh, like, can it actually be manned because we need someone to be able to move the car, whatever. But they were talking directly to NYPD about this in a way that like hasn't happened before. So that has been a good use of our time, I think, in convening. It has not been an effective use of our time to try to sort of like wrestle with existing operators about stipulations.
Yes, yeah.
Especially ones that they consider themselves or, you know, to be operating well.
Yes.
Great.
Todd has his hand.
Sounds like, oh yeah, Todd, comment?
I will be brief. One of the leverages that we have is if it's done well with the right data and a compelling written report from the task force. And we know that there are going to be headline makers when the inevitable bad actors come up and there are the incidents. The elected officials and the other community groups will raise hell. And if we have this report and we're on record with this data, that's the big part of the leverage that we have.
So let me just be clear. So we had a meeting with Liz Kruger and Eric Botcher. Like, the nature of the problem is that the problem is existing outside of the confines of any establishment. And each establishment is being like, to some source of validity, saying, those are not my customers. Those are the other guy's customers, right? And so it makes it much harder for there to be any sort of assertion or blame or be like, there are bad actors here. I mean, there's really a way to think about it that there are no bad actors here. There is just a density and a confluence of late night operation. And that's sort of what's going on. And that's very hard for us to sort of navigate and find change with. Anyway, but I'm happy to move forward with there being two different deliverables. One is suggestions for how we could change the affidavit, and to Melissa's point, a list of things we might want to know, and come back to the committee with those, and then we would potentially disband the task force and figure out how we're going to get answers to the questions we have.
That sounds great. Does somebody want to make a motion to that
I
effect?
don't think we need a vote.
Oh, we don't need, okay.
Because we don't actually,
We're just discussing, yeah.
we don't know, we also don't, like, only Brad can disband a task force, so like, I'll just talk to Brad.
Okay. Oh, perfect. That sounds great. I think with that, we can conclude that topic unless anybody else has any comments. All right.
Thanks,
That-
everybody.
Yeah, that concludes our agenda. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Not bad.
What?
Uh-oh.
No, he called